You are a nobody. Don't pretend you matter. That's what my mother said to me at Sunday brunch. By the time I slid that black folder across the table, her face had gone white as the tablecloth. She had no idea I'd been planning this moment for 3 years. My name is Sophia Reeves, I'm 28 years old, and this story still keeps me awake some nights. Not from regret, but from the sheer weight of what people will do to their own blood for money. Growing up in the Caldwell household wasn't like those picture-perfect families you see on social media. From the outside, we looked normal enough. Holiday cards with forced smiles, family vacations that somehow made it into scrapbooks, a refrigerator covered in my younger brother Dylan's terrible school drawings like he was the next Van Gogh. But inside our house in Millbrook Heights, it felt like living in a group project where I was doing all the work and still getting blamed for the bad grade. Dylan was my mother's favorite child who could break things and be called spirited. I once spilled a cup of juice and got sent to my room for being careless and dramatic. When I won a small art contest at school at age 9, my mother glanced at the certificate and said, "You really should focus more on science. Art won't get you anywhere." That same week, Dylan brought home a participation ribbon for Best Listener. She framed it. The only person who didn't treat me like an afterthought was my father, David. He wasn't flashy or dramatic, but he showed up. He helped with homework, made the best grilled cheese sandwiches on the planet, and actually listened when I rambled about books I was reading. He was steady, quiet, present. I didn't understand why my mother, Patricia, was always so annoyed with him, like his mere existence was a personal insult. Then everything changed when I was 12. I was sitting in our living room eating stale popcorn and watching a show I didn't care about when my mother turned off the TV. She said she needed to show me something serious. That's never a good start. She scrolled through her phone messages, held out the screen, and said, "This is from your father. You need to see what kind of man he really is." The message was short, just one line. "If you take her, I'll kill you both." I remember staring at the screen, my brain completely glitching. She told me he was dangerous, that she'd always known something was off about him, that she was filing for full custody to protect me. She rubbed my back like she was the hero in this story, said I didn't need to be scared anymore. What followed was the complete erasure of my father. No phone calls, no visits, no "we'll figure it out." Just gone. David Caldwell was edited out of our lives like someone had deleted him from the script, and I was told to be grateful. But that was only the beginning of my real nightmare. The years after my father's disappearance turned our house into something cold and calculated. My mother stopped pretending we were a loving family. I became her emotional punching bag, her live-in help, the daughter she didn't want but had to manage for appearances. Dylan got louder, lazier, meaner. I got invisible. When I was 15, my mother married Vincent Torres, a smooth-talking financial advisor who insisted I call him Dad. The day the ink dried on their marriage certificate, I stopped calling my real father anything at all. Vincent moved into our house like he'd always belonged there, rearranging our lives to suit his needs. I shoved my father into a mental box labeled dangerous and tried to forget he ever existed. But some things don't stay buried, especially when they never made sense to begin with. There were too many moments when I'd hear someone talk about their dad and feel this weird ache, like I was grieving a death no one acknowledged. The threatening message itself never felt right. My father was the guy who cried watching animated movies, who apologized if he raised his voice even slightly, who told me he loved me every single time we talked. But questioning one lie means questioning all of them, and I wasn't ready for that. Not yet. Fast forward to my 20s. The doubt got louder, the questions got heavier. One sleepless night when I was 23, I picked up my phone and sent a message to a number I wasn't even sure still worked. Hi, I don't know if this is still your number, but I wanted to say hello. Sophia. He responded 15 minutes later. Sophia, I've been waiting 11 years for this. That's when everything started to unravel. And that's when I realized just how deep the lies went. We met 3 days later in Riverside Park, neutral territory. I half expected him to look different, colder, like maybe the version I remembered was just childhood wishful thinking. He looked exactly the same, just grayer and smaller somehow. We made it all the way through 2 cups of coffee before I asked about the threatening message. He didn't flinch, didn't get defensive. He just shook his head slowly and said, "I didn't write that. I didn't send it. I never would have." He didn't beg me to believe him, didn't try to convince me with tears or dramatic speeches. He just said he was sorry I'd had to carry that fear for so long, and that he understood why I hadn't reached out sooner. The weirdest part? I believed him immediately. Not because he had proof, but because my gut stopped screaming the second he said those words. So I started digging. At first, I didn't know what I was looking for. I wasn't some conspiracy theorist with red strings connecting photos on a wall. I was just a daughter who wanted to know what the hell actually happened to her family. I did something about it. I trained, studied, and became a private investigator. Not the trench coat and magnifying glass kind, the legal, boring paperwork kind. Digital forensics, record analysis, asset tracing, metadata recovery. Once I had those skills and credentials in place, I made my move. I went back home. I told my mother I'd lost my job and couldn't afford my apartment anymore. Said I was struggling and needed help getting back on my feet. She rolled her eyes but said I could stay in the laundry room. Not the guest room, not my old room, but the actual laundry room with a rattling dryer that shook the walls all night. Dylan still lived there too, contributing absolutely nothing except dirty dishes and opinions nobody asked for. No job, no rent, no chores. But I had to pay my mother $500 a month plus handle most of the household cleaning. Every night, listening to that possessed dryer rattle against the wall, I reminded myself, just a little longer, just until I find what I need. Because I wasn't there to bond or because I had nowhere else to go. I was there because I knew they'd hidden things they never expected me to find. And I was right. It started with an old laptop shoved behind some sweaters in my mother's closet. Password protected, but nothing I couldn't get through with my new skills. Inside were folders with sloppy names like legal stuff and asset backup and, I kid you not, do not open. I opened it. There was a draft of the threatening message. The fake one. "If you take her, I'll kill you both." Typed in a Word document and saved 5 days before the date she claimed it was sent. There were notes in the margins, revisions, different versions. There was even a comment bubble that said "too dramatic." But that wasn't the worst part. I found email chains between my mother and Vincent from back when they were still just friends. They discussed how to make my father look unstable, how to protect the money, how to time everything perfectly. There were detailed plans about the custody battle, the asset division, even which lawyers to use. My mother had claimed during the divorce that my father made a bad investment and half their assets had just disappeared. But in another folder, because of course she backed everything up, I found scanned bank records showing wire transfers to offshore accounts, fake shell companies, all set up under Vincent's name. They had stolen everything. Framed my father, taken the house, the business assets, manipulated the custody agreement, and left him with nothing but a reputation he didn't earn. I printed everything, made copies, gave the complete file to my father and his new lawyer. But I kept one special copy for myself. The copy I would slide across the table at Sunday brunch. 3 months of living in that laundry room, playing the role of the struggling daughter who needed help. 3 months of "thank you for the napkin" and "yes, I'll vacuum the stairs" and fake smiles at Vincent's weird jokes about millennials. They still treated me like I was invisible. No one asked how my job search was going. The closest I got to attention was my mother asking if I still drove that little car. I got a mug that said "World's Okayest Daughter" for Christmas, clearly a last-minute gas station purchase. Dylan got a new smartwatch and a trip to Cancun for his mental health. So when the moment came, when my mother decided to use Sunday brunch as her personal performance review and called me a nobody who didn't matter, I was ready. I clinked my fork against my glass and said, "This won't take long. Just 3 sentences." By the second sentence, her face had gone pale. I pulled that black folder from my bag, slid it across the linen tablecloth, and said, "The originals are already with people who matter. This is just for your personal enjoyment." Then I walked out. I didn't go back home. I checked into a short-term rental under a different name and waited for the blast radius to settle. 2 hours later, Dylan texted me, "What the hell did you just do? Mom's having a meltdown. Vincent's yelling. They won't tell me what's going on." I didn't respond. For once in my life, I wanted them to sit in the uncertainty, to sweat through their designer clothes and wonder how their perfectly constructed house of lies had suddenly caught fire. The legal proceedings moved quickly. The judge called it a systematic pattern of deception that compromised custody, finances, and personal safety. Translation: they had lied repeatedly on paper for over a decade. The ruling was swift and brutal. Full restitution. Every penny they stole had to be paid back with penalties and interest. They had to liquidate the house, the cars, the investment accounts Vincent had been so proud of. Vincent tried to claim he didn't know what was happening, said he trusted his wife's financial planning. That might have worked if he hadn't literally signed the wire transfer documents with his own name. They sold the house within 3 weeks at a significant loss. My mother moved into a cramped 2-bedroom condo with leaky faucets and no proper insulation. For the first time in her life, she didn't host a housewarming party. But Patricia Caldwell-Torres wasn't done being dramatic. About a week after the court ruling, she made one final desperate move. She created a Facebook account using my name, copied my photo and bio, even reposted some of my old updates word for word. Then she started writing completely unhinged posts claiming my father had abused her, that I was mentally unstable, and that we had hacked her accounts to frame her. It was pathetic and incredibly stupid. It took about 15 minutes for the digital forensics expert to trace the IP address back to her condo. Same Wi-Fi network, same browser history, same laptop she used to stream her yoga classes. When the judge saw the evidence of her attempting to impersonate me online, he didn't even look surprised anymore. "Mrs. Torres," he said calmly, "you fabricated a threatening message, embezzled from your ex-husband, and now you're impersonating your daughter on social media." She tried to cry. It didn't work. Even Vincent wouldn't make eye contact with her. As for Dylan, he disappeared the second the money ran out. No loyalty, no apology, just a quiet unfollow on Instagram, and what I assume was a frantic job search for something that didn't require a resume or any accountability. He never texted me again. I was perfectly fine with that. My father bought a house with the restitution money. Not a mansion, just a modest place with a real yard and a porch that gets good afternoon light. He called it peaceful, which I think was code for not haunted by my ex-wife's voice echoing through every room. He invited me over the day he got the keys. When I walked in, he handed me a cup of coffee and said, "No big speech needed. Just thank you." That was enough. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, the kind where your nervous system finally remembers it doesn't have to be on high alert anymore. He asked what I planned to do next. I told him, live. Like I don't have to rebuild myself from scratch anymore. He nodded. Good plan. A week later, I got an email from my mother. The subject line read, "You'll understand one day." The message was exactly what you'd expect. Lots of "I did what I had to do," and "you betrayed your own family," and "you always were ungrateful." She signed it "Love, Mom." I didn't reply. I just archived it in a folder I labeled unsolicited fiction. There was no big announcement after that, no social media reveal, no essay about healing and moving forward. I didn't want revenge for the sake of destruction. I wanted quiet. I wanted peace. I wanted the truth. And that's exactly what I got. No more explaining myself to people who had already decided I didn't matter. No more justifying why I felt like a permanent house guest in my own family. Just silence. A kitchen stocked with actual food. A living room that feels like mine. A father who makes terrible dad jokes and never uses humor as a weapon. They used to say I was nobody, that I didn't matter, that they forgot I existed half the time. But here's the thing about nobodies. We watch, we remember, we learn exactly how broken systems work. And when we finally speak up, we don't scream. We bring documents. They said I was invisible, that I didn't matter enough to remember. But it turns out I was the only one paying attention to everything they thought they'd buried forever. Some days I still wonder if I went too far, if there was a quieter way to handle it. Maybe I should have just walked away and built my life without digging up everything they tried to keep hidden. But then I remember how many years I stayed silent. How much I let slide. How much they counted on me doing exactly that, staying quiet, staying grateful, staying invisible. So no, I don't regret bringing that folder to brunch. I don't regret watching my mother's face crumble when she realized her perfect lies had finally caught up with her. The little girl who was told she didn't matter grew up to be the woman who mattered most of all. And sometimes, that's exactly the revenge the universe had in mind all along.